Hey, Allison Verhalen here, and I hope this is working. If not, I will try again later. But in the with working on the assumption that it is working, I want to talk to you today about the psychology of marketing, how you can use it to make your marketing even more effective than it already is. If you don't know anything about me, I did stumble into this career of content marketing, had no clue when I went to college that this was even an option, much less that I was accidentally getting the perfect degree for it. I majored in English and psychology with a minor in theater. So had no clue there was something out there that could use all three of those things. But luckily for me, I stumbled into this and here I am. So I think it's pretty obvious how my English degree helps me in a job that involves a lot of writing. But I do want to talk about the psychology degree and why it's some of the specific ways in which my psychology degree has been so helpful to me in the world of content marketing, doing my own marketing, doing marketing for my clients. There are three and a half. There's one that's I kind of merge two together because they're really strongly related. But there are 3 to 4 ways that my psychology degree has really been helping me. First and foremost is branding. I talk about this a lot because it is kind of hard to wrap your brain around how to go about creating your brand, right? So one of the things that I always ask my clients, a new client when we're getting started, is how do you want people to feel about your brand? They usually have an answer right off the bat, right? That I want them to feel these 2, 3 things. This is how I want to be perceived in the world. Awesome. Now let's reverse engineer that and think about the types of content, the kinds of content that you're going to put out there that are going to position you that way, the messaging of your brand, the colors of your brand, all of the things that you're putting out there that are going to achieve that goal of making people feel this way when they interact with your brand. That can be easier said than done, right? For most people, yes, they know how people want to feel when they interact with their brand. That part's easy. The reverse engineering part is a little bit harder. It's not something in a sense, you can measure it, but it's hard to measure people's feelings, right? It is kind of an amorphous, intangible thing that you are trying to create. So that can be a little tricky. So that's one of the ways in which my psychology degree has really helped, is knowing, okay, what are the words that people are going to associate with this? What are some words that are going to turn people off? Knowing who your ideal client is also super helpful. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Your marketing funnel. Super important. This is one of those things I always ask people, what does your buyer journey look like? And I tend to get a blank stare because people don't know. Or they're just going out there and networking and doing speaking events, and people are finding them that way, and that's great, but they know they can't get to the next level that way. There's only so much they can do when they are the one bringing in the leads, making the sales, and doing the thing. So creating your marketing funnel and knowing where people are in the buyer journey when they encounter each piece of content is hard. Especially because you can, and I have a whole other video where I've broken it down and say, this is what this looks like. These are the types of content you need for each stage in the buyer journey in the marketing funnel. That makes it a little bit easier. But there are a number of pieces of content that don't always fit into one stage of the buyer journey, right? Blog posts are a great example. Social media posts are a great example. There are going to be people who have never heard of you before who are finding these blog posts, these social media posts, these videos, right? Have never heard of you before. And then there are going to be people who have been following you for a while, getting your newsletter. Maybe that's how they saw your video. Maybe that's how they got your latest blog post was in an email. So they do know about you. They are, maybe they're not ready to buy, but they're familiar with you. You have some brand awareness with them. So you kind of have to be aware of that when you're creating those things. Kind of assume the reader, viewer knows nothing about you, but at the same time, be aware that there are going to be some people who are reading this who do know a lot about you. So what that means is don't be afraid to repeat yourself, because I've encountered this all the time in my own life where I know I don't want to repeat myself, but when I'm listening to someone who has said the same thing over and over and over, I'm never bothered by it. And wouldn't you know, it's always going to be like the 15th time that I've heard them say it that the light bulb goes off. And suddenly it resonates with me in a whole new way. I don't know if it has to do with the mood I'm in at the time or something else I've learned and suddenly it clicks. I don't know, but there is something to be said for hearing something over and over and over again before it really sinks in. So don't be afraid to repeat yourself. Assume they know nothing. And if they do know about it, that's fine. Little repetition never hurt anyone. And actually, that's how you pound that information in, right? Is just repetition. So that is one thing. The next part of this, these are the marketing funnel / CTA are the things that are, you can kind of break them up into two different things, but I like to think of them as one thing, because your CTA, which stands for call to action. This is what you want people to do once they're done reading your blog post, your social media, watching the video, whatever it is they're doing. What do you want them to do next? So the CTA stands for call to action, right? So it depends on where they are in the buyer journey. So you can have the occasional blog post or social media post that's like, hey, guess what? I have this new thing. You should buy this thing. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. That should not be all of your blog posts. That should be at most 10 to 20% of your blog posts and social media posts. Most of them should be all about, again, leading people through the buyer journey. What do you want them to do next? So I see a lot of people who either don't have a call to action on their blog posts, or their call to action is, hey, schedule a consultation with me. I compare that to proposing on the first date, right? If they just found you, if they're just learning about your brand, if they're just learning about your industry, maybe they're like, what is this content marketing thing? What do I need to know about it? So they go and they do some searches and they find a blog post and they're reading a blog post, and now someone wants them to schedule a consultation. I'm not ready to buy. I was just trying to figure out what this thing is, right? Don't propose on the first date. Don't do that. Instead, think of where they are in the buyer journey. What is the next step in the buyer journey? And how can you motivate them to take that next step? That's where the psychology degree really helps, is understanding what makes people tick so you can motivate them to take that next step. FOMO is a big one. People hate missing out. So if you can, I don't want you to create a sense of urgency or a time limit where there isn't one, because that's inauthentic and no one likes to be lied to, and they will figure out eventually that you lied to them. So don't do that. But if there is a time limit on, let's say you have a webinar and there's only a certain amount of time to sign up before the webinar happens or the live event on LinkedIn happens, let them know about that, especially if it's a free event. So what does it make sense? What is the call to action that makes sense? How can you motivate them to take that next step? And how can you make it easy for them? We are lazy people, and there is not a ton. We're not invested yet to take the time to fill out a whole form, to get to the subscribe to your newsletter or sign up for the webinar or whatever it is, right? We're not that invested. Can I just give you my email address and call it a day? Yes. Okay, great. Thanks. Or click a link, right? The shorter and easier you can make it, the more likely people are to actually take that call to action. So that's the other part, right? Is making sure that it's compelling enough. You've given them a reason to take that call to action, but also make it super easy for them to take that action. The longer, more complicated it is, the less likely people are to sign up, especially earlier in the buyer journey. Maybe if you're trying to get people to buy, if you're getting them to that final stage, then yeah, they're more familiar with you. The good clients will be more eager to take that action to get that to that next stage. And if they're not, maybe they're not a good client for you. So last but certainly not least is the emotional content, tapping into their emotions. This is the story you tell at the beginning of your blog post. This is the why should I care? What's in it for me? How to take that call to action, why they should take that call to action. Tapping into their emotions is, again, easier said than done. It sounds really easy, right? You just tell them why they should care. That can be easier said than done, especially because for those of us who are in the weeds all the time and dealing with this all the time, it's obvious to us. Like, of course you should care about this because of all these reasons, right? I often have a hard time when people tell me, or ask me to tell them why they should care about blogging. I can never come up with like just one reason off the cuff, right? Is because there are so many reasons that my mind kind of overloads with all this. Like, what do you mean you don't understand? Like, of course it's important, but they're not thinking about it the way I'm thinking about it. So I have to A, organize my thoughts and come up with those reasons that are most important to them, and B, think about it in the way they're thinking about it. What is their history? How are they approaching it? What are their pain points? What are their problems that I'm solving for them? And if I can frame it in that way, excuse me, in that way, then it's going to be much more successful. So empathy, so key. And I'm not saying you need a psychology degree to have empathy. That is not what I'm saying at all. But it does make it easier, especially when you have an understanding of psychology. And, it's easy to have empathy for people who are like us, but sometimes you're working with people who are not at all like you. And it can be a little bit harder to have that empathy. Having that psychology degree and understanding, oh, this is where they're coming from. This is their background. This is why they're thinking this way. Makes it so much easier. So that is it. Those are my tips for you today. If you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out. You can reach me at my website. You can find a ton of information like this over at my website over at AV, as in my initials, Allison Verhalen. That is avwritingservices.com. And you can reach me directly by shooting me an email at info@avwritingservices.com. That's it. Have a great week and happy blogging, everyone.